Welcome to Season 3 of the Knack for Business podcast. Over 350 episodes strong, we're here to ignite your entrepreneurial spirit with fresh insights, networking gems, and creative strategies that elevate your game.
For the audience, why does selling still feel so uncomfortable, even when you believe in what you are offering? If you ever felt like you're too quiet, too kind, or not wired for the high-pressure world of sales, this episode is for you. Mark joins us to unpack how you can build a successful long-term client base using a calm, respectful, and deeply effective approach he calls the Quoin principle. This isn't about flashy tactics or fake urgency. It's about finding a method that feels right for you and still gets real results. Stick around to discover how gradual personalized selling can actually lead to more meaningful growth, less stress, and greater client satisfaction. Our guest today is Mark Kempf, author of Unfurl Your Sales. After more than 40 years in the insurance sales world, 7 of those in management roles with major insurers, and the last 3 as a trusted advisor at a large brokerage, Mark has seen just about everything a sales career can throw your way. Specializing in group benefits, Mark built deep, long-term relationships with many clients staying with him over 15 years, some even over 30. Now retired, Mark has turned his attention to sharing what truly worked for him, a client-centered, respectful, and highly effective approach to sales that he refined over decades. In his new book, Unfurl Your Sales, Mark unveils what he calls the Quoin principle, a slower, more methodical style of selling that proves you don't need to be pushy to succeed. His goal is simple: to hand over the decoder ring he once wished someone had given him. Mark, it's good to have you here, sir. Welcome. So, 40 years of sales, that is a really long time to be in that business, but you must have some really cool stories that go in there. Like, what are some of the major surprises you encountered?
Well, when I started off desperation, like many people start in sales. I didn't plan on it. I thought I'd be a teacher, and ended up that was not possible in 1980, 81. There were just no teaching jobs at all. And my wife and I were married my last year of university. And my wife said, I don't want you to go to teacher's college for 2 more years. She was, we were tired of living like students already. So I went looking for other work, and insurance sales seems like the least likely job or occupation I would ever have in my life. I just wasn't suited for it. And many people told me that. I was just too nice, too gentle, too unassuming, that I would just get eaten alive and fail at it.
It's always the quiet ones you have to watch out for, by the way. So what surprises did you come across while you're doing the sales piece that made you go, hey, that's special?
The one thing about it, the thing that really turned me on to the industry actually, was we made a real difference. From almost my first day, I was delivering the odd death benefit check. And that makes a big difference in a family. So I knew I was doing good work. And I also knew that I wasn't ripping anyone off or selling them something they didn't need. I really thought I could add value. Meaningful work meant everything to me. And so that's why the career suited me, at least on that side. The other side is, and what many people maybe wouldn't have recognized in me, is that I'm highly competitive. So usually just with myself. I was competing with other salespeople, certainly for some accolades, but I just really liked getting better and better at the role.
So people said you couldn't swim with the sharks, that you get eaten alive. Tell me how you made your style work for you.
Yeah, it's a great question, Wayne. Initially, you're kind of forced to talk about and use the style that the insurers give you, right? And some of it I found very uncomfortable. It's not that it was over aggressive. It just was dog with a bone. So it would not give up on things, even when there was clearly no reason to keep talking about it and keep arguing the point. The one thing I realized pretty quickly was it's better to be friends and say goodbye than annoy someone too far. That was really enlightening. And once I was on my own and having some success, I felt confident to do that way. So that was sort of the whole start of the Quoin principle, sitting back and relaxing and not pushing for sales. In the book, I recount a really short story, but it was so true. I went to see this husband and wife, and we got talking. After about 15 minutes, the husband turns to me very seriously and says, you're unlike everyone else who's ever come in this place talking about life insurance. And I've never bought from anyone else, but let's talk seriously about it. And so that became a sale. And it was just because I was laid back and relaxed. And I think it was just that I wasn't pushing the point. and always took the view that whatever's good for the client is best.
So you brought up the Quoin principle. Unpack it for us. And how's it differ?
Yeah. So the Quoin principle, well, let me tell you how it started. Over years of selling, I went through lots of sales courses. In the office I was in at the time, we did a sales course where I found it was way too aggressive. And it wasn't even pressure packed, but the lean was so strong. I found that very uncomfortable. And I was reading Moby Dick one day, the novel Moby Dick. And about 2/3 of the way through, you have to get pretty far into that big fat book to get there. I came across this definition of what a quoin was. And the definition, I'm going to read it to you. A quoin is a solid which differs from a wedge in having its sharp end formed by the steep inclination of one side instead of the mutual tapering of both sides. That's pretty dull. Basically, it's saying that a quoin looks like a doorstop and a true wedge looks like an axe head, right? That's the problem with sales. We're using a wedge, like an axe, which is an aggressive act. Even if we manipulate and hide it, it's still an aggressive act. A quoin is just a gradual leaning in and changing the perspective for the person. I just found that idea of gradualness inviting. I'd been doing some of that, but once I read that and got deeper into the thought of it, what a quoin really was, spelled Quoin, but pronounced coin. Once I got deeper into it, I realized that is the magic formula for me when it comes to selling. In my book, I talk about goal setting and aligning with your own values, and I take it all the way through the sales process, all the way out the other side is the service process, and even what happens when you lose a client, how to treat that. If you treat it all as the same principle, the same way you sell is the same way you service, then the whole thing is so much more comfortable. Clients are not alarmed by anything, including the sales process itself. They're not alarmed by the discovery. They're not alarmed by the solution. They're not alarmed by the close because there really isn't a close. It's just part of the same process.
So what myths do you think entrepreneurs are holding that keeps them back or traps them?
Entrepreneurs in general, well, entrepreneurs are under a lot of pressure, right? If a salesperson's the same way when they're starting out or even their first 5 years, they have to make a living. The myth is that you can get a little further if you add some pressure to the mix. Entrepreneurs can stay too busy and get too aggressive. On the sales side, which is what I know best, entrepreneurs ought to be salespeople. They think it's a numbers game. The more numbers I do, the more results I get. The idea of the Quoin principle is the opposite of that. There's no point in calling 100 people in a day and getting nowhere. It's much better to organize 6 calls that matter and have a process for engaging them. You'll get far further with smaller numbers. And that's part of the Quoin principle. And on entrepreneurs, especially when they're starting, they have to just grab business as much as they can.
When you're describing the wedge, whether it's a wedge or doorstop, or Quoin principle, it sounds like there's an emotive component, a sense of urgency. Fire, right, is not a graceful delivery mechanism. How do you figure out how much level of energy to put into the conversation without putting someone to sleep or not making them feel like, if they don't act now, it's FOMO. For those that don't understand, fear of missing out is FOMO, right?
Yeah.
Right. So how do you find that balance, that sweet spot?
I think that's the magic to it, where I was too gentle, too nice, and too quiet in a meeting. How do you add that urgency, but not make it aggressive? And so you do it through a lot of techniques, mostly questions and answers and working within the world that the prospect is giving you to work with. How do you not put somebody to sleep? I think by concentration. I think it's a matter of concentrating on the moment so you're aware of everything. We call it emotional intelligence or active listening, but it's even more than that. It's body language, it's everything else. So in a big meeting, if I'm in a boardroom with 3 owners of a company and we're talking about a lot of things and they have different opinions and attitudes toward things, I come out of there in an hour exhausted because my concentration level is this: I've been in the boxing ring for that hour. And even though it's a very gentle and comfortable spot in my brain, it's just spinning constantly. That's how it happens. Is the concentration in the moment is very important. So you don't miss a thing, right? On the sales side, in the old days, it was ABC, always be closing, which just meant pressure, pressure, pressure. In the Quoin principle, there's almost no close. There's a moment where you have to ask for the business likely, or you have to at least say, there's an assent that you have the business. But really, you're just getting through that point as if it's any other point in the sales process. So it's pretty smooth, but you have to be concentrated on it. And I do think, Bernie, that a lot of the intent of the meeting is just how meaningful it is for the people in the room and how much I work within that meaningfulness for them. I get excited when they're excited. I get excited when we're solving problems or when things are working out. And in my head, I'm still thinking about 12 other things at the same time.
Was there a day you said, no, I am a subject matter expert and my job is to import what I've learned in a way that's meaningful so that you make the best decision? Can you tell me the day that clicked for you?
That's a really interesting question. So because my career kind of evolved, let's say, from life insurance disability sales into group benefits largely, and still estate planning for executives. On the life insurance side, unless I'm in the old days when I was just doing mom and pop insurance kind of stuff, that I ever felt truly competent to do very, expansive sales for executives. But on the group benefits side, I became an expert. I remember being in rooms where it didn't matter what question was asked. Either I had the best answer or I was comfortable not having the answer. And I think those were the days when you realize, "Yeah, I'm good at this, And I also thought, I honestly thought that there are other good people doing this work, but no one's better than I am to help this person. So it's not arrogance at all, right? It's just a confidence that I can do the job and want to do the right job for the client.
I've done sales training, and they say that half sales don't get made because no one asks. Walk me through that balance between asking for a legitimate sale that you've earned that is right for the client and not wanting to put yourself in a spot and be afraid. Walk me through when you should ask.
Right. Well, some parameters. First of all, you should never ask for the sale. ABC just makes no sense to me because you're asking for the sale when it doesn't apply. So I don't think you should ever ask for the sale or even move toward the conclusion of a sale. I think of it as falling off a log. That's what the sales close is like. It's just logical you're going to take the next step. You should never go near the edge of that end of the process until the person's ready to say yes, because you don't want them to say no. That may be one meeting in, or it could be 3 meetings, or it could be 3 years. But whatever it is, you don't ask for the sale until it's ready. And how I ask is, there's an idea of temperature check. Ask if the client's getting closer, if they're getting what's going on. I agree with temperature checks, but I do it in the softest way. So I'll just say on the side, does that sound good? Any questions on, it's not a big step. So I'd never ask a summation question, or try not to. I'm sure I've stumbled into it, not on purpose, asking, okay, we talked about 12 things. What do you have questions on? I may ask that if I don't think a yes is in the cards that day, but mostly it's not about that. I try to find out in earlier times how the decision process works in a company, who needs to say yes, how it's presented. I don't want to ask the person in front of me. I don't want to ask Wayne to make a decision if Wayne can't make a decision. He may have 90% of the authority, but he still has to pass it by Bernie to make sure everyone's on side. So you set it up that way. You don't ask for the sale. I would just make sure that Wayne had all his questions answered, felt good about it, and was going to champion the cause. But I'm not actually asking Wayne to make a decision. The point is, you're just moving along through the process and everything feels the same way. For instance, let's say I'm going through a benefit plan. I'm talking about the finances of it and how it's priced and what their appetite is for more or less, if they want to change insurers and all those other things. We're having a discussion about insurers. Ask about their favorite insurers, their least favorite insurers, if they consider moving insurers to get more than they want. We'll talk about plan design. We talk about every little step. It's just one thing after another. And it just all kind of dovetails together to where it's a complete picture. And then you say, this is my favorite line, and I didn't know it till about a year ago. A guy named Ted Olson, who's on LinkedIn and has a book called Feel Good About Selling. His line is, I doubt Ted created this line, but his line is, common next steps are, and that's the close. So we've gone through all this. Everything's good. Everyone's happy. And you say, so common next steps are that I would take over your current plan, get all the historical information, and do a deeper dive analysis than we've done today with the information you've given me. And we would start looking after your plan. And then we'd start to make the changes that suit best. It's about as gentle as you can get and still directly ask for the sale. But I'm not asking with that question. So I'm sure my questions sound good. What I used to say was, especially on benefits, I would say that there's 2 ways we can do this. we can start looking after your plan after we change insurers, but it's better if we do it up front with the current insurer. And here's why. So I was doing the same thing. I just didn't have a one line for it that I liked. Ted Olson has a good one line.
It's interesting as you're describing this, from the insurance side, you talking to someone that's going to make a decision, or it might be a communal decision. Say it's your spouse. Having worked in a larger corporation, sometimes it's an RFP process and so forth. Does the game change then? Because if it's an RFP process, that's not a tomorrow thing. Typically,
Right.
there's sometimes emergency purchase, like, we need something because, something fell apart and then need a replacement piece. But is the size of the business a factor? And is it the dollar size value? If it's like $1 million item, you're buying a piece of mining equipment, do the rules of engagement still equally apply?
Well, I say they're all different, and certainly different for RFP. So with RFP, my experience with them, I only ever did about half a dozen of them. And I don't think I ever got a sniff at any of them unless I had a personal relationship. I find the RFP process is corporate window dressings. They're still going to pick people they know and they like and they've met. And the RFP is just an official version of that. You can spin your wheels doing RFPs. I'm not saying it's always the case, but when it comes to companies with, let's say, 1,000 people and less, I think that's pretty common. By getting asked for an RFP, I always ask, how'd you know about us? Why are you recommending us? Because I want to know if there's something I should be aware of that I don't know. But Bernie, on the larger cases, they are completely different. Going back to the idea that the whole sales process is one continuum, one of my favorite, there's many questions I might ask first, almost in a first meeting with a client. But my favorite go-to one is this. And I would have used this about half the time in my last 10 years. Your benefit plan is probably number 3, 4, or 5 on your annual financial statement as expense. And so my guess is, I would have some idea of their numbers of employees. I'd say my guess is that's about north of $1.5 million. How much time do you spend every year determining how to best spend that $1.5 million? And you get enough out of that $1.5 million to keep spending it. Most workplaces, there's more complaints going on about how many pairs of work gloves the guys get in the back shop and where the Christmas party is and how excited they are for a new microwave in the lunchroom. And you're spending $1.5 million and getting nothing for it. So, just start the conversation that way. I think a big number makes sense, but really, if I'm an entrepreneur and I'm spending $100,000 on my benefits and my payroll's $1 million, that's a lot of money. Sometimes a person will say, I don't really think about it. It's just money we have to spend. One of my clients brought this up to my attention that for him to spend $1 million on benefits means he needs about $14 million in contracts. So to net a certain amount of money to pay that $1 million, it's really important, So it's not really, and what I want to do in that question is reframe it. So I don't want to say, I can save you $100,000 of $1.5 million. That's almost irrelevant because they should be paying the right number for what they want to get out of it. What matters is that the employees value that they're spending $1.5 million. So for about 5 years, we worked on how we could expand the value that the employees see in the group benefit plan. So we had all kinds of strategies for that. Employers seem to love that. But Bernie, I want to go back to your question more specifically about decision-making when it comes to corporations. One of the things I realized as I got bigger and bigger was that the decision makers often aren't in the room. The CFO is probably not going to be in the room. I was dealing with HR directors and other people, and somebody from the C-suite would be there, or more than one person, but not all the decision makers. Sometimes it's not whether they're making a yes decision, but they could have a veto vote. And so how do you deal with that was starting to concern me. And I came up with a strategy that I thought was pretty effective. After a meeting like that, I used to ask if they wanted this, and sometimes they say yes, sometimes they say no. So now I never ask. After the meeting, I would send an email and say, thank you very much. Just, the usual kind of appreciate it. I might highlight 2 points. Really glad we spent so much time talking about these 2 things. I would say, see attached, there's a summary of the subject matter we've been discussing. It's on 1 page. And if you want anything changed on this, let me know, and it can be shared with others. So what happens with that is that now the easiest thing for that HR director is to pass along that attachment, right? That's the easiest way to summarize the meeting. She doesn't have to redo everything and get it wrong or only see it from her perspective that the CFO may not be seeing from their perspective, right? It might be missing the key information the CFO wants. So now they've got all that data and it's in short form, so somebody's going to read it all. And then the other thing I would attach to that, and there's a whole nother subject in the book. It's a very large subject, but that's testimonial letters. I'm a huge fan of testimonial letters, how to get them, how to design them, how to make them say what you want them to say. With that summary, I would always send 1 or 2 testimonial letters attached and highlight a few key points. If somebody hands me a piece of paper and in hand, somebody has underlined 12 words, I'm going to read what those 12 words are, right? And after that, they may read the rest of the letter. It will get over some hurdle. Is Mark Kempf any good at this? Can his brokers do the work? Is there anyone in the same industry they work with? Is there somebody the same size they work with? Especially if there's a hot topic in that corporation. If the people I've been meeting with said, we had a real problem with the group plan, a bunch of claims weren't paid, something went sideways with the insurer, everyone's really upset, then I'll pick a letter that talks about us dealing directly with the insurer and solving problems. Armed with those 2 things, the people that have veto votes or don't know anything about the conversation to date and are now going to have a 15-minute meeting with the HR director on it, will have a lot more of the information I want them to have to make that decision.
In your book, you have a title, and it could actually have more than one meaning, which I really like. Tell me about unfurling your sails. You chose that. Unpack that.
Wayne, you've written books. It's hard to title a book, isn't it? It's hard to title a book that makes sense to the topic and also that somebody else hasn't used already. But I do like where I landed with unfurl your sails, partly because I think the whole Quoin principle is like an unfurling. The only things that we think of as unfurling are flags, right? You kind of slowly unfurl a flag, or a sail on a sailboat, unfurl the flag or out the sail. What I love about it is that unfurling your sail is the same kind of thing. It's a slow, methodical unfurling. Then the sail on a boat fills full of wind and away you go. And you go to the direction you're aiming and off you go. And I think it's the very same thing with sales. So very slowly you furl the sail in front of the client with the client, and then you end up going on the adventure with the client, wherever you want to get to.
You know, being too quiet or too nice. It's interesting. That's kind of people would frame it that, a person would be too nice. Is there a perception that sales should be more carnivore, like predatory? Is that what you found in the past? And obviously you didn't approach it that way, but is that the stereotype that people want to portray, or is that something like from the 50s, from the good old days that aren't so good?
I think it's still a stereotype, even if it's just knee-jerk reaction. Years ago, when I was in management, trying to hire people into this industry, one of the surveys that was done was 100 occupations and whether you could trust them and whether they would do a good job for you. Insurance sales was pretty low on the trust scale. When it came to, it was very low on the scale of industry as a whole. When the same person was asked about the person they dealt with, it went way up into the top 10. The knee-jerk reaction may have nothing to do with reality, but I will say that there's just pressure to make sales, right? For instance, I have a sale that I made last year that took about 8 years. The reason it took 8 years was structural. It was the previous owner, his friend, skiing friend, all those kind of structural things. And I had proven twice in that period that we could do a much better job, but the owner wouldn't budge, even though everyone else in the executive suite wanted them to. I just had to wait that out. But the way to wait it out was to stay in touch and be present with them, right? Even help solve some problems for them. But when it got close to, here's how I'm answering the question, Bernie. When I got within about 3 months of that sale, the sales manager at work started bugging me. Did you call them? We got to make that sale. We need it for this month. We got to do this. And being an old guy, I would say, no, we're cool. I'm not asking for a yes yet. And I just hold them off because there was no yes at that point. I was in constant contact with them. So the HR director knew that we wanted it as soon as it was okay, then let's go. But I didn't want to miss a day of working with them. But until she said it was time, it wasn't time. There's still lots of pressure in the industry and lots of pressure to make a sale. We have to resist some of that and be wise about it. I'll give you another example. One that I've done in my past too is somebody will say, call me on May 15th. The week of May 15th will be when I want to talk to you again. And so on May 1st, I'll get a calendar message, call on May 15th. And then it's like May 9th might be the Monday. And it's like, I'm going to give them a call. It's wrong to do that. Many people wouldn't have cared. They were just thinking mid-May. But I called the guy once. He said, I told you to call on May 15th. Call me then. Okay. I guess I screwed that up. I was just urgent, rushing to get the thing started.
So interestingly enough, in sales, you hit on a couple of neat points. You have arrogance and you have lack of confidence. And they're not the same, but they have similar layouts. Point that out to me.
Right. Well, I think arrogance can happen anytime. Arrogance is like the axe way, right? That is the axe method. That you just think you're good enough, and people should want to listen to what you have to say and should deal with you. Confidence is earned. And I actually twin it in the book with success and accomplishment. Success is sort of an axe thing, right? You can have great success, and there's nothing wrong with success at all. But there's a lot of people that talk about how successful they are. And that's an arrogance thing. And it really is an axe method. The Quoin method, the Quoin principle part, would be the accomplishment part, right? That you've earned your accomplishments through hard work and dedication and resourcefulness and all those other good things. And you've accomplished goals. So success could be a 1 day or a 1 year thing. Accomplishment is a long-term thing. And I think confidence comes from accomplishments, things you've actually earned, as opposed to just thinking you should earn them.
They say coaching is holding a mirror up to someone's face. How do you tell a client that they might be being too overt and that they would do better if they change some things?
Yeah, usually through stories. Not always stories though, but usually stories. Or just framing it. So you want to reframe it into a certain spot, right? And you want to say, here's where you're at now. There's a couple of different options that are available to you. And then build the frame out from there and say, what part of that frame would you rather be in? So again, not with any pressure or close, just reorientating their viewpoint, perspective. And perspectives are always different, right? And sometimes it just takes that. Say, I can see why you've been here when you've been working at this place for 30 years and you've gone up to where now you're the COO, and that's great. But you've always been on the same train. There's all these other people with other trains and other people on platforms looking at the same thing. Maybe I'll just, in a very nice way, reorientate the conversation that way. Been quite successful at that, I would say. The problem is it takes time. So you can't rush that at all. It just has to be very gradual.
Why do car salesmen get such a bad rap?
Usually they're pushing or climbing over each other, but I've dealt with some really good ones. I mentioned a conversation in the book about a car salesman I met one day and what she did in a 5-minute conversation. In the book, I say, not everything she said probably was casual or, some of that stuff may have been designed, but it was really well done. I think car salesmen get a bad rap for that. It's different now though, isn't it? Whether it's used cars or new cars, and you have to wait a year for a car, they're just filling orders. It's a real different experience.
It might be more than a year. Do you find that when, and drawing a parallel here, and I'm thinking someone who manages kids, and they give you the 5-minute warning, etc., or sometimes you come across someone that has a large clutch of kids, right? And so they have to kind of pre-position their frame of reference. Is sales a bit like that too? You just have to kind of frame things so that you get compliance, and the compliance in this case, the sale, without it being, I guess what I'm trying to find out is there a way to sell the right thing to the right person and not the wrong thing to the right person?
We have to know them, so you have to understand what their needs are and also what they think their needs are. In the old days, we used to say, sell them what they want and then sell them what they need later. I think that's a little too cavalier, right? You don't want people buying the wrong thing. I'm trying to frame it right, Bernie. I think by introducing subjects and then dealing with them another time is a good way to give a 5-minute warning, or to give them something to read in the meantime that they probably won't read anyway, but maybe they'll read the headline. So if I'm meeting with another person, I may send them an article I've found, for the purpose, let's say. And it'll say, we're going to be discussing benchmarking of your benefit plan. Here's an article on it in case you want to give it a read. That way is kind of like a 5-minute warning. They know that subject coming up and gives them a chance to say no thanks. When it comes to the close, I'm really not a fan of assumptive closes. The real old style. Bernie, when I'm your agent, we're going to do this together, sort of thing, because it's smarmy and manipulative. So you can say, it's fair to say though, if we're looking after your plan someday, this is the kind of thing we'd want to do in the first 30 days, or first 90 days. So I'm not saying I'm your agent. I'm not saying I'm going to be your agent. I'm just saying this is what it would look like if we were your agent. And I think that's a 5-minute warning, right?
Who's the best fit for Quoin?
I'd say the best fit is any sales occupation that is professional and is more than one meeting sale. So if you're buying something that's going to be a one-time only thing, yeah. I mean, somebody may walk in and check out shoes. Chances are, if they've gone to a shoe store, they're going to buy a shoe, right? So I don't think coining, the idea of talking to people, asking questions could work there, but really, it's really about the longer term sales. And in the book, I've tried to frame it not just as a benefits sale, because I didn't want it to be a benefits only book. Most of the stories are about benefits related because that's what I know. And I didn't feel right talking about subject matter I didn't have any knowledge of. So there are people trying to get grants for charities. There's people trying to get architecture contracts. There's all kinds of different selling going on for very professional reasons. I don't have experience with that, so I didn't want to give examples of it. Although I would mention it in context of some of the subject matter. But coining is really for longer term processes. And that could be a sale that happens in 3 weeks and 3 meetings. It could be a lot of things, but sometimes it's much longer. One of the keys with selling is when you're going through the discovery process, getting a good sense of when the sale could possibly happen. So getting a sense, you may not know that right away, but getting a sense that this sales process could take 3 months or 6 months, or this sales process is going to be a long-term game, and then kind of reorientate the sale to that perspective. The sale today is what step I want to take with, the next time, right? So next one could be that I can come back and do a solution meeting, or I can come back and have a broader conversation about this, but with 2 other people that you've mentioned that I should meet with. I'm always aware of what the sale I really want to make next is. And sometimes it can be just inches from where we are today.
The person struggling in sales, whether they own the company or not, what are a couple of things they can do quickly to change things that you recommend?
Yeah. One of the last chapters of the book actually is when you should decide to give it up, and also what to do to get straightened out if you're in a slump. So I was in some deadly slumps. You go through periods where you can't seem to not find people that want to buy your product. And there's other times when you can't find anyone who even wants to talk to you. And the whole thing is frustrating. I think some of it's just good luck and some of it's hard work. You go through those periods. So when I was in a slump, these are the key things I would do. First, I would clean up everything. I clean up my desk. I clean up my drawers. I go through my old planners and find if there's anyone I forgot to call, all those kind of things. Just give myself a clean environment to start from so I felt fresh. Usually, I grew to only want to do sales of a certain size because, the more clients I had, the less time I had, and less energy and focus I had for it. So I wanted to make it worthwhile, but also sales that needed my expertise. So there's no point my expertise being wasted on somebody who doesn't need it. I try to have sales of a certain size. In a slump, I would say, what are the quickest 5 things I can do to make a sale and get somebody to put pen to paper? Because I just want to get in the habit of doing it. Because you'd really get out of the habit of filling out forms and just having conversations with people if you're not having them for about a month or 2, right? And then the other thing is a trick that I did after holidays. You go on a holiday for even a week, and generally on my to-do list on that Monday morning would be the 4 most important things I have to do. Follow up with this person, solve this problem, call that prospect, the 4 most important things. And the first call I make would just be terrible. I'd just be stumbling on my tongue and not talking like I'm in business. So what I would do is I plan a couple of calls to burn out. So I have my to-do list. I may have 12 things on it. I take 2 of the least important things and make those calls first. I think that's actually not a bad idea if you're in a slump, to just get active, start talking to people. If my approach is usually by phone or by email, just the first couple, don't make them too important.
Next 5 years, where do you see things going in the sales processes at
Yeah.
large?
Well, in the books that are being written, we keep talking about nicer selling and slower selling. Now, what I find is people do that until it's not urgent or until it's not important enough or until they're under stress. So I think we still have to keep sending that message out. Bernie, one of the things I've become a bit alarmed at, and I don't really know what percentage to put on this, whether it's 10 or 15% of the new hires, but it could be much higher. What I found is that they've been sold a bit of bill of goods. The pressure's low because we've got a good system and all these other things. And then they get into business and they find out they have to take action that's maybe uncomfortable to them because that's selling, and they're not ready for it. They're not geared for it. They're not thinking they'd have to do it. And so I never, in my office, because I was the old, one of the successful guys, people will come to my door quite often and talk to me. I didn't want to do full mentorship and I wasn't training people. I'm not coaching them, but there's a few people that where I thought, how are they failing? Like, that guy looks good, smells good, talks well, writes well, presents well. How is he not making a living at this yet? So I take them out for breakfast or lunch or coffee and have a conversation with them and start to suggest a few things. And what I found out was that some of them have absolutely no interest in being better than they are today. They have no curiosity. They think it should be happening for them, because they are all those good things, right? And so I would try to just kind of push and prod and suggest a few things. And if they just push back all the time, I'd say hello to them, but I wasn't interested in helping them because there's no help for that person. There may be after 2 more failures trying it, they may wake up and decide they should try something different. So Bernie, I think that's actually a risk in the sales industry. I don't think it's because the generation is too coddled. I don't think it's because there's not good people in it. I don't think it's because they're not hardworking. I'm not against it as a generational thing. I just think that as an industry, we've been forced to hire people that probably aren't suited for it and aren't willing to figure it out. I had to figure out how to be successful at this. And I had to basically create my own system by gathering a bunch of stuff from other people. It's not that I didn't steal and borrow, but I was very curious and watchful. You have to be that way to be successful. And so for these people, if they're not willing to even think that way, then it's hopeless. I think that's a big problem. With artificial intelligence, there probably will be an acceleration out of necessity because there won't be enough people to do the job, where some of the real easy sales are being made, completely by chatbots. And so I think that'll be very common. It won't be unusual for me to decide I need mortgage insurance. I'll go on some website, but I'm really talking to a chatbot, and the whole sales basically completed through a chatbot. Or I'm got a company with 3 people, and I think I should have a group plan, and I go on some company website, but it ends up being almost chatbot driven. There may be somebody monitoring, there may be somebody at the end of it tying the bow on it, but so I think there's going to be less people needed. As an industry, we have a serious problem with enough trained, educated, and experienced people on the service side as well. That is a real problem. And part of it's because they get paid what they should be paid now. They probably weren't before. And so we could have more of them. Now there's not as much money per person to go around, or, same amount of money, but we can only hire 1 person for that job or 2 people where we maybe need 3 or 4. So I think AI is doing some work. I'm basically retired, but I'm doing a little bit of cleanup work for some of my life insurance clients. I had to go see somebody a few weeks ago, and being no good at Excel and not having access to support people now, I can ask somebody to do it and they would be helpful, but it's not really their job anymore to help me. I just went on ChatGPT and I had ChatGPT make me an Excel spreadsheet of the work I'd done, and it made me a graph. I changed colors on it, and that's me going to the self-checkout at the grocery store. It's not using a skilled person.
Mark, if this resonates with our listener, how do they get a hold of you?
Very good. You can go to unfurlyoursales.com, my website, or you can go to unfurlyoursales@gmail.com, and that'll connect with me directly.
Well, I say thank you to Mark Kempf, my co-host Wayne Pratt, you, the Knack for Business listeners. If you're finding that the sales aren't running as smooth as they can, or you have a team and you're trying to get them on board and aligned, reach out to Mark. Reach out to Mark's book. But there's no pressure here, folks. It's here to help you. And follow the example Mark was giving. It's not about the pressure. It's about being confident, relaxed, and getting there.
To reach the podcast hosts, email them at info@creativeinsight.com or by the website creativeinsight.com, spelled KREATIVISIGHT.com. To reach Wayne at his email, wayne@motivateyou.ca, that is MOTIVE, the numeral 8 and the letter U.ca, or his website, motivateyou.ca. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast and share your knowledge, let us know. We would also appreciate your feedback on the content or format. Check the show notes for more details. For these podcasts, we like to acknowledge the support and thanks to the following people. Carl Richards from Podcast Solutions Made Simple, a renowned podcast expert. Fred Crouch, who is the Property Wizard podcaster, where Bernie is a co-host. Jovan Strika from Hive, a co-working space that is more than just a space. Then Melanie Weber, Bernie's invaluable business partner. And Wayne Pratt from Motivate You Inc., who serves as both a coach and co-host of these podcasts. Disclaimer: please note that the Knack for Business podcast episodes are meant solely for educational and general informational purposes. The information and opinions contained within are not intended to be professional advice on any subject matter. The thoughts, views, and opinions expressed by the participants are their own personal beliefs and do not represent the views of the podcast hosts or any affiliated organizations. It is important to note that this podcast is not a replacement for consulting with certified experts in your area who possess knowledge of your unique situation. The hosts of the podcast, along with any participants or affiliated groups, do not take responsibility for any actions taken or not taken based on the information presented in this episode. It is highly recommended that individuals seek guidance from their own personal advisors in fields such as accounting, law, or other pertinent areas prior to undertaking any actions or making decisions that may impact their financial, legal, or other aspects of life.